Hey, I'm coming to you again for the Daughters of Liberty for a little video on spinning techniques. A number of my friends have acquired new wheels to them. Some are antique, some are more modern, and they've taken beginning spinning classes whereby they have learned to card wool. They have learned also to pick wool to get it clean. And I'm going to show another technique today that is even simpler, and it is spinning straight from the fleece. So this is some fleece that I raised. This is an island sheep, island heritage breed from off the coast of Maine. And it has a fair medium crimp, not too tight, but you can see the end of the lock where it stood out in the weather is slightly dirty, and sometimes they're yellowed, sometimes they have a little manure caked on them. And those are going to be just teased out and loosened up. There's some chaff in here from the hay and the grass. There's a few weed seeds and a little bit of barnyard dirt. Some of the fleece can be quite matted down at where it was cut off. If the sheep have slept on their sides a lot, the fleece where they sleep will get tightly matted, and this all the job that the process today does is loosen up those matted ends. So I'm going to take out one of these locks right here. I'll take out this one, and I'm just going to take a hold of the bulk of the fleece and pull the lock out. Now here you can see there's a nice decided crimp in this. This is not a long wool, and it's not really a blocky short wool either. It's kind of a medium, and there's a little manure in there. So I have several tools that I use for this. They are easily obtainable and commonly found in most stores. Now, this is a cat brush, a slicker brush, something for finishing for dog shows. It has the kind of needles on it that look like they're from the hand cards. This is available at any pet store. I had one that was called Flicker that has the same sorts of needles on it. They're embedded in leather and it's on a wood backing. That would be more period correct if you're doing reenacting. The other tool that I might use would be, this is a regular dog comb with a wood handle. The finely spaced teeth are intended to get out the small bits that aren't wanted in dogs' coats. And then there's one also, this is for horses' manes. And the teeth are wide spaced, so this would be more for a long wool where you would draw the wool through the teeth to get out the tangles on a wool that's fairly loose already. The one I'm going to use on this little fleece is the narrower spaced dog comb. So I grab a hold of the butt end of the fleece where it was cut off, and right up here I just comb lightly across the tips and while holding tightly onto the fleece. Now, if the tips are tender, if they've been out in the weather and the freezing snow and had sleet on them and are rain soaked, they can break off quite easily, and that's okay. You don't want them in your wool anyway, because that's where you get all the little kinds of pilling afterwards. Now you can see there is some fleece left in this dog comb. Those are the tender ends that I have just combed off. I'll drop those on the floor. Now, if you're doing this on a fleece that has not been washed, and you can, it doesn't matter whether it's washed or not, and doing it in the grease or straight off the sheep, it leaves a lot of lanolin in the fleece, but when you're doing this, you'll get a lot of debris in your lap, so sometimes a towel over the lap helps. This is the end where it was cut off, and I just stick in the dog comb and pry gently against those matted butt ends. So a little bit more fleece in the combs, and I'll just put that on the floor. That can be used for pillow stuffing. So this is the end that was cut off. This is the end that was against the weather. I'm going to grab a hold of the end that was cut off and hold it like a fan in my hand. Now, when I touch down on the leader as I'm spinning, I will touch down this bottom edge, and it will just start to twist. And then I can control, by rotating my wrist, how much of the wool goes into the fiber as I spin. Now, when I do spinning demonstrations at fairs, festivals, and for schools, I spin multiple fibers. I spin flax, I spin wool, I spin colored wool. I let the kids pick whatever color they want out of wool that I've dyed, so they can see it appear on the spinning wheel as it's spun and gets stored then on the bobbin. They'll see their color show up. This, what I've been spinning is flax being spun into linen, and it's very rigid. This is a flax wheel. Some of my friends have flax wheels, some have wool wheels. This one can also spin wool, but it spins it fairly fine. Some wheels have a larger orifice right here, so you can spin a thicker wool. This one is just fine for what I do with the children at the schools. So I'm going to start the wheel spinning, and this one has a constant take-up. There is no Scottish tension, so the wool is constantly being drawn onto the leader that I had that was flax. And now I'm just going to pull back a little bit. If I want, I can spin long draw with one hand, where I just draw the fiber back and to a distance, and let the wheel just do the twisting. And out of that one little lock, you know, I'm getting all this long length of yarn. Now, the double drive band wheel doesn't take it up very fast, so you end up getting quite a lot of twist if you do that. Now, what I've done here is just spin this one lock, and it has gone onto the wheel right here, and I can see the difference in the color between what I was spinning before. Now, one of the things that I always tell my friends is, once you've spun a lock and you want to decide if that's the kind of yarn you're going to use, you pull back a little bit, double it back on itself, and then let it twist back on itself, and to see if you like what the finished yarn as a 2-ply would look like. So now I'll break this off, and if I were spinning at a school or at a festival or a fair, I would hand this to the young person or to any age person who's watching me spin. And that is a yarn that could be used knitting, weaving, crocheting, doing a number of jobs. So that's in a nutshell how to spin straight from a fleece, either washed or not washed. If you don't wash your fleeces, it's called spinning in the grease. You get a lot of lanolin in the wool that then can be washed later. Not all of it comes out, so some is always retained in the wool, and that's especially good for outdoor mittens. This is a very pale gray long wool. Now the other one was maybe only half this long. Here you can see this has been washed, but that means that most of the lanolin has been washed out and the dirt has been washed out, but it hasn't been picked and obviously not carded. So this one right here, where it was cut off against the skin, again, it is fairly tight there and it's matted. It needs to be loosened up. And on the tips, you can see how faded they are from the sun. The sun fading is not a bad thing, and if the tips are tender, we'll just comb them out or flick them out. So I'm going to choose just a little bit of this hunk here to demonstrate, and maybe I'll just grab a hold of a lock like this and tease it out of the mass. And so this is a fairly curly wool. Doesn't have a tight crimp, but it has a really nice wave to it, and it is a good 6-7 inches long, minus the weathering on the tips. So this would be pretty. The Romneys might look like this. There are some other long wools might look like this. So to deal with this wool, you can comb it just like we did before, using this little comb, or I can try just flicking it with the cat and the cat slicker. So I'm going to put it on my lap, and so you can see already I've loosened up the butt end where it was cut off just by tapping it. Now, if you have a piece of leather on your lap or some tough, like this is a fairly heavy linen canvas material, it helps to not destroy the fabric of whatever you're wearing. So in just tapping on the ends, see, I have loosened those up completely. And now, to just make sure it's all not tight in the middle, this is just like brushing hair. So there's not very much in the card, or in the slicker. And now I am ready to spin. So this is quite a bundle to spin. And you can tell by where it was cut off by that's darker, and this is paler that was out in the weather. So I'm going to hold on to the butt end, and I'm going to fan out the end that was out in the weather. And then I'm going to start the wheel spinning. And as I start the wheel spinning, and as I touch the fiber down, I start to draw back. And I only grab from the bundle as much fiber as I want at any given time. And as you can see here, I'm maintaining this fan. And if I don't run my fingers over, it stays quite fuzzy. If I run my fingers over, it gets slicker. So here is the end of my yarn. And I'm going to let it draw on to the wheel. There we go. And that was one lock. Now I'm going to turn the wheel backwards just a little bit, the bobbin, and bring it back out. This is now 2 strands of what I just spun, and it's going to be fairly tightly twisted. This is a wheel for spinning, doesn't have very fast draw, so I'm going to get a pretty tight twist here on this. And now that was a wool that had very little crimp in it. It was very much of a long wool. So this particular yarn is extremely tough and strong, and it doesn't have much stretch or elasticity. So it would be great to use for any garments that you don't want to stretch much, that have to be very long wearing. And that's spinning the dark gray or the medium gray wool. And now I want to show another spinning. Here is another gray wool, and if you can see in the light, it has a very tight crimp. And I'll take this little bit off, and we'll see. So you can see the weathered tips are very, a little bit bleached by the sun, and there's a weed seed of some sort. But in general, it's quite clean. It has been washed. It has not been picked. It's just, this is the lock as it would have been on the sheep. Now, this particular one needs very little preparation in order to spin, which is something that I really like. You just barely touch it with the flicker brush, and look at how it just fans right out. And now on the other end, these ends tend to be a little more tightly crimped together because of the weathering, but it just hardly takes anything. You don't even have to hold on to it very tight. Then there's no matting in this one at all. And so I'm just loosening up, barely just touching it to loosen up all of the fibers. Now that took about, 10 seconds, and this is ready to spin. So I don't even need all that fiber. I'm going to take half of it away. You can tell this was the outer end where the bleached ends were, and this is where it was cut off against the skin. Now, in taking my leader, I'm going to try the spinning again. And for this one, I'm going to touch down and just catch the tips. And keeping the bundle in my hand, I'm going to fan it out and just gradually let a little bit go in. You can see the fan that I'm maintaining. Now I'm going to draw this back out to let it twist around itself. And this is going to be a completely different characteristic yarn. The fleece itself was very springy, and so what we get here is a yarn with a lot of elasticity. This would be great for something where you needed stretch and you needed shape retention, but it's not going to be as durable as the heavier yarn that I spun before from the other gray fleece. This one is very soft. So that again is a simple way to spin without all the work of carding and of picking. So thank you for watching, and this is again one of our Daughters of Liberty videos that help to show what sorts of techniques were used in the times gone by. Thank you for watching.